Okay, so am I sharing? Yes, I think I'm sharing. I'm recording. We'll see. It all works out. So I wanted to do a little workshop on Milestone 1. This is a updated version of Milestone 1, with the intention of being more directly connected to the student time in life. And so just to give you a quick overview, the concept really is looking at this choice you have. You could go to college, you could not go to college, and thinking about the implications for budgeting, and then specifically around the professional path, thinking about, well, what is it going to cost me, and then how do I pay that off? And that's something that we've worked on really hard in this first section of 101, the financial section, which is I think for a lot of students, like a really, really important set of tools for the future. Okay, so without further ado, the plan here is do that quick overview, what math skills are needed, what Excel skills are needed, and then I'm going to do a walkthrough. I'm just going to start working on this as if I were a student, of course, a very confident student that has an idea about what to do. And let me know if you have questions as we go through. So that's a written overview. I have that in my course under the description of the project. The 50-30-20 rule is a pretty common construct to think about how you're using the money that you're bringing in. And that's not something that we necessarily talked about in class, but it's something that you can easily Google, and I'll show you that when we get to that point. Main math skills, just kind of went through the Excel doc, and I thought about the types of math problems that you're going to be solving, thinking about this pay and cost. This is on the first sheet, solving problems and applying just critical thinking to issues around how to scale things up, which is something that's come up over and over again in these first couple of weeks. Finding percentages of values, that's from module 1. Doing percent difference calculations, also from module 1, I believe. Finding required payment for a fixed amount of debt, APR, and time frame, that's the PMT formula. A very complicated algebraic formula to solve if we don't have the luxury of PMT and a spreadsheet. And then this total repayment, which is kind of an extension of that. If we know what the payment is for a fixed time frame, then we can figure out how much we pay total. And then creating a payoff table and evaluating savings. And the last one is really kind of a combo math Excel skill. The payoff table involves a lot of basic math, addition, subtraction. The finance charge is the interest charge. I guess that's not basic math, but then putting that all together and evaluating the savings, that's a key question that we're trying to solve mathematically. So in my kind of thinking about the Excel skills, not trying to get too granular here, but obviously you have to be able to do basic computations in Excel, use cell references to link cells and do calculations, and I'll show you some examples of that. I think that basically, aside from doing basic computations, the only formulas you're going to need are the sum and the PMT formula for this project. And then autofill is a big skill. If you don't have autofill, the payoff table is going to be a little painful in terms of, how many times you have to keep typing things. I put these other two, advanced computations, kind of doing multiple steps inside of one cell. That comes up when we do percent difference, and then fixed cell reference, which can be helpful. I've had a couple of students ask me questions on the payoff table about the APR. They're trying to use a cell reference because I've hit it so hard in class, like, hey, we got to use cell references, but then there's times where this thing actually isn't changing, and so then a fixed cell reference is useful. All right, so without further ado, let's do some math. Any questions before I jump into the actual assignment? Hi, Erica, welcome. Okay, great. Well, we got a couple people here. It's nice to not just be talking to myself. And at any point, as we're going through. If you have questions, just raise your hand, shout out, however you want to do it. Okay, are you seeing the Milestone 1 worksheet?
Yes, sir.
Great. So just one note about the formatting of the worksheet. There's 3 different key areas, and I think that in every section there should be some kind of rubric explainer that helps connect the types of things into the types of tasks into parts of the rubric. I think that's can be helpful. That is a little bit sort of advanced studenting, but not beyond your capacity by any means. So the 3 main areas are research, which is we want to answer a question, but we need to ask the internet for information. Thinking about how to link the resources. We're not doing official citations here, just sort of making sure that the person who's reviewing this can look and say, oh, this is where this number came from. And then some writing sections. And I think you should have had some opportunities to practice writing and get feedback in the lead up assignments into this milestone. But of course, if we're going to talk about the math that we're doing, and it's not just about getting the right answer, then we need to be able to communicate about it. And then finally, this Excel calculation part, which is the more traditional, the calculation part, the traditional part of a math class, but then we're doing the Excel, technology piece on top of that. So let's jump in. I've got my Milestone open here. I saved this in a different folder. So of course I would have these 2 things open and ready. Some people that I see in class working do the split screen approach. I like to use the shortcuts Alt Tab, which is the Windows version, and Command Tab if you're on a Mac, to switch back and forth, because sometimes when you shorten up the screen, say with Excel, like you're trying to do half of the Excel screen and half of the Windows screen, you actually lose a lot of the functionality in the main menu. So I like to just switch back and forth. That's a nice keyboard shortcut. Okay, so let's do some work. So the first part is not individual. Everybody's answering the same question. I want to find a typical pay for a high school graduate. I'm going to just pull out, I got to go back to my thing, but I got to open up a new window here. So typical pay for a high school graduate. See, I've asked that question before. Generally, I'm going to skip over this AI overview because I actually want to get to an actual site. And I'll just take this ZipRecruiter site. And this looks like the kind of thing that I'm looking for. In general, I don't think you have to push yourself to dig super deep into this research. I mean, if you were really getting into this, maybe you would look at 3 or 4 different sources, but I'm just kind of doing this very very kind of expeditiously. Like I just want to get the result that I need so that I can move on to the next task. So $17 an hour, that's the question that I was trying to answer. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just say $17 per hour. I'm really not going to worry about the highlighting here. That's part of the research question, so it's kind of going down with the words here, but I do want to put in the hyperlink. So I highlight this and I'm going into insert. And then I see the link option here. So I've got the text already set up. I just need the address. So I'm going to switch back. Again, I'm using my Alt Tab or Command Tab if you're on a Mac shortcut, and punching in my address. I'm going to test it. So if I press Control and click on it, it takes me over here. This page is no longer available. That's not a good sign because I wanted this URL to be able to work. So I'm not sure what happens. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go in here and test it again. So I'm going to right click here and go to edit hyperlink. And yeah, I don't know, it's all this other stuff here. It feels like it's a little confusing because I don't see any of that here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would it be acceptable for us to literally just copy and paste the link under the number 17.
Copy and paste the link under the number 17.
Yeah, so like type $17 per hour, enter key, paste, and then just have the URL dangling after it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So we have this, and then it's not a functional hyperlink. You're just putting it here. Is that what you're
Sure.
saying?
I mean, it's still going to be functional if you press space. It's
Enter.
just
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this is better, but it doesn't, you're still meeting the ask of the task if you leave the hyperlink there.
Okay,
But
thank
that
you for
is
clarifying.
good point. Okay, so yes, this is working now. I feel good about that. That looks like exactly what I want it to look like. It is working when it takes me there. That's the kind of thing I want to do as I go through, is just make sure my hyperlinks are functional and getting the person to the right place. Okay, so now I'm ready to kind of talk a little bit to why is this an estimate? And one of the things that I notice about this here, and I'm not going to dig too much into the writing parts of this, but the $17 an hour, I don't know what I'm going to make if I've just graduated from high school and I'm going to get a job. And if you've been in this situation, then you know what I'm talking about. But just because the average is $17 an hour doesn't mean that's what you're going to be making. And that's what this graph shows. We're going to talk more about that when we get to the statistics section. But apparently there's some people who are making as low as $7.38 an hour, and some people who are making as high as $32.91 an hour. So speaking to that, I would say whatever you're doing writing, just make sure you're using complete sentences, and try to be more expansive rather than less expansive. But that's the kind of thing where you could, if you're doing this ahead of time, you can always, go to a specialist and say, how do you feel about this answer? I think it's helpful to have another set of eyes on your writing, especially if you don't feel confident about your writing. All right. The part I'm really interested in is, let's turn this hourly estimate into an annual estimate. And the bold italicized parts of this document, which by the way is going to be submitted as part of the milestone, indicate that I should go to Excel and do something. So the hourly estimate, I'm putting in 17, and now I need to come up with an annual estimate. And so the part about sort of solving this problem and thinking through it is really personal in terms of you thinking about how you're going to approach working if you're not going to college and you're just working to earn money. So does anybody know off the top of their head what a common number of hours in a work week is for people working full time?
I usually go with 40.
Yeah, so if I work 40 hours per week, so let's start there, equals 40 times 17. Now, the way that I've typed this is not as good as it could be because I'm not using a cell reference. So what I would rather see people do is use the cell reference here to indicate we're taking 40 times B2. That's the number that's there. In general, in Excel, if we've already written the number, we want to use that number through cell reference instead of retyping it. And there's multiple reasons for doing that. One is that it's going to cut down on our errors so that if we're typing a more complicated number, we don't make a mistake. And number two, if I change the number and I realize, well, actually, if I go back and look at this site, it was 1698 if I read it carefully. So I'm going to actually put 1698 here. This automatically updates. I don't have to go back and retype multiple things. That's the value of the cell reference. Now that just gets me to a week's pay. And so the next piece of the assumption I'd have to bring in is, well, how many weeks am I going to work? A lot of students don't know how many weeks there are in a year, kind of thing you can ask Google. How many weeks in a year? Hint, it is not 4 times 12. So you got about 52 weeks in a year. Depends on whether there's a leap day or not. There's an extra day in there, 2 days. So, are you going to work all 52 weeks or are you going to take some time off? Let's hear from a student. What do you think? Are you going to work 52 weeks or are you going to work less? And again, this is you not going to college. This is you just being a worker out there in the world. Anybody want to chime in? Asil, Erica? How many weeks?
I would probably take 2 weeks off.
Okay. So if I work 40 hours per week and I take 2 weeks off during the year, then I will work 50 weeks total. And so I don't have to put the number here. I just need to explain in this box where this is coming from so that when the instructor is looking here and they're saying, oh, you took 40 times B2 times 50, those numbers appear in the description. So we can see the assumptions being clear. So we're done with step one, I think. Let's go back
But
here,
wait,
look at it.
just to confirm,
Yep,
the 50, that comes from 52 weeks in a year minus the 2 weeks vacation, right?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And if somebody was being really ticky-tack, they might say, well, I want to see that part of it laid out too, but I don't know. I feel like that's okay. So, from my perspective, these tasks are not going to have anything underneath them in the Word document. You're just going to do that for highlighted tasks and you're going to do it for writing tasks. But these tasks, I think, will generally have everything in Excel. We'll see if that holds up as we go through the document. Okay, intended career. So I'm going to write a little bit here, 4 to 5 sentences. Sometimes it tells you how much you should write. Sometimes it doesn't. But I am thinking about becoming a therapist. I really want to be able to help people with mental health problems. Okay, so I'm just typing more here. I've got 4 to 5 sentences. Be expansive. Why are you interested in it? Right. And then this highlighting is telling me more research. So I need to Google something about how many years of college would I need to be a therapist? How many years of college do I need to be a therapist? Again, the AI overview can be helpful, but I'm going to need some kind of URL hyperlink to show me how to do it. I've also have these sponsored things. I'm going to get past some of that to get to, again, well, this is another university, so I don't know, but they're at least seems like they're answering this more generally. Here's Indeed, positive psychology. Okay, this seems like a more general site. And now is the part where I have to kind of read. Okay, here we go. In the United States, typically requires a bachelor's degree. And in a few cases, that alone is enough to start practicing. Okay. And again, this part now, because it's personal, can sort of become, as specific as you want to be in terms of your own life. But I'm going to call this good enough because I think this part is interesting, but also not probably the hardest math part. So I found that I may be able to practice as a counselor. Practice is a sort of technical word here, meaning I'm doing that work with only a bachelor's degree. And so now, given that I'm a student at NLU, I'm going to figure out, oh, sorry, I'm sort of jumping ahead. Let me stay focused on this part. So I needed the URL, boom. And again, you can leave it like that, or if you want to be fancy, go to edit the hyperlink and change the text to something like link with description to therapist college journey. So how much do you think the college training would cost in total? So this is where I was sort of headed. But I do need another piece of information here to help me because in this part, I've got to be able to talk about the undergraduate and graduate section. I determined that I wasn't going to have to go to graduate school based on the one site that I looked at. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but at least it gets me started. And then I was going to go and find out how much the NLU tuition is. Of course, as a student, you may have a better idea. This is 2022-23. Again, if you have a specific number, you're welcome to bring that in. This is a little complicated, of course, because different people have grants, but this is the tuition for a year. That's what I mean by time units here. Like, how are we measuring this number? So that's the tuition dollars per year at NLU. So if I could do a bachelor's, typically that means I need to do Control Z, save my life. It's really annoying when you lose all your writing. 4 years of undergraduate. And so here I would just say, well, I want to do 4 times my undergraduate salary, my undergraduate cost, sorry. And I think now how much do you think college training would cost in total? So I did that part, and now I'm into find the range of salaries for that kind of work annually in Chicago. So now I'm back to doing research. What kind of money do therapists make in Chicago? Okay, again, we've got some AI overview here. I've got Glassdoor. Let's try Glassdoor out. All right, 67,000 to 117,000. 58,000 to 100,000. So there's various ways that I could read this. And if you look at the question, it's talking about the ranges of salaries. So first thing, I'm going to bring in the link because it's a research question. So I'll paste it in here. I'll make sure that it's working. I don't know what all those letters are at the end, but it does appear to be working. So that is good. And again, I could clean up that URL. I'm not going to do it right now, but I do still need to answer this question, which is, I see that therapists make somewhere between 60,000 and 120,000. Now, notice that I'm rounding these numbers here, and I was using kind of the bottom end. Oh, is it doing that? There. Using the bottom end of the base pay up to the sort of top end. That's what range means, right? And there's actually a calculation that we can do for range, which is the biggest number minus the smallest number. We're going to talk about that in statistics. But from a more sort of conversational standpoint, range can also just mean, tell me the lowest to the highest number. And so that's what you're seeing here. And whatever site you end up on that's telling you about salaries is going to tell you that, because that is the reality of doing any kind of work. There is a range of salaries that you can expect. You are not guaranteed to have one specific salary. So let me see that I've answered this question. Okay. And then, so again, this is a writing question, and let's just throw this out to the crowd. If I just got my degree and I'm starting out, and it is true that I can just start with a bachelor's degree, do you think I'm going to be making closer to the lower end or the higher end of the scale? Anybody want to take that? If I'm just starting out, does it make sense that I'd be making towards the lower end or the higher end?
The lower end?
The lower end, yeah. It's going to take time and experience to get me up to the higher end. And so probably even using this median pay, and again, we're seeing a little preview of some of the statistics stuff that's coming our way, is probably not going to be accurate. I'm not starting off in the middle of the salary scale. I'm going to be starting off at the low end. So I have to decide, I got to put a number in here. I'm going to say, 67,000. And now I'm done with this first sheet. All right. Any questions before I go on to the next step? We're 2 steps in. Okay. So this part can get a little intense and overwhelming. There's a lot of numbers flying around. One of the things that I wanted to point out, oh, this was the file that I wanted to have open, was that you did some work in module 1 around budgets. And I think that could be really helpful for you here. But let me pull this up here. So this is where you're starting, and I would just bring in the income. This is a cell reference from another sheet. I could type it, but I can also just grab it from this other sheet. So what I did was I started with the equal sign, and then I clicked on the tab and I clicked on the cell that had the information. You can see that the cell reference is a little weird. It's got this thing in quotations and the exclamation point. You don't need to really worry about all that. By the way, this is monthly, so this actually needs to be scaled. Again, another scaling question. How do I take something that's annual and make it monthly? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to grab this number here. How do I take something annual and turn it into something monthly?
Are we assuming that we're paying the same amount every month or receiving the same amount every month?
I think that's a fair assumption, yeah.
Okay. Well, then can't you just split it into the 12 months equally, split it into 12 equal pieces? So that's
Yeah.
division, right?
Yep, splitting it up into 12 equal parts. Perfect. So, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm looking at this tab. This is the high school graduate budget. So I was like, man, this is a great number. I'm real happy with this. But no, that is not the right number. We got to go back and get the right number, which is this number, and divided by 12. Okay, well, that's somewhat less. But of course, that is part of the reality of, why people go to college is because they can earn more typically with their college degree. Okay, so we're ready to start filling some of this out. And to some extent, again, this is a section that you can, put different levels of investment in terms of the reality of your situation. Maybe you're already renting. Maybe you know some friends who are renting and you want to get a real accurate number for what it's like in Chicago right now. Maybe, you're living at home and so you don't know anything about renting. That's where that first sheet would come in, that first assignment would come in. And I do want to pull that up real quick. So let me go grab it. And while I'm doing that, you can kind of look at the categories here and think if anything is missing, something is like obvious to you that you spend money on and it's not there, you're welcome to add more rows and I can show you how to do that. But just kind of look over the categories for now. And let me pull up what I'm talking about with this module 1 assignment. Okay, so this was the assignment, Alfredo's budget. And this is the sort of text of the assignment. And then this is an example of the budget actually filled out, which is what you should have, I hope, after having done module 1 yourself. And so again, I think you could pull some numbers directly from this budget to help you if you're, totally in the dark about, well, I have no idea what heating might cost every month. So I'm going to do a little bit of that here just to get us started. Did anybody think of a category that felt like it was missing or have a category that they're like, I don't know what that is? internet is ridiculous right now. It's very upsetting to me. But I do only pay $15 a month for my cell phone, which makes me very happy. Yeah, I'd have to look at some more specific numbers here. But so again, I'm using some work from Alfredo's budget to help me kind of move forward here. But you can put more energy and effort into this if you want, in terms of thinking about, well, what is my life like, or what would I be spending if I were a high school graduate and I, was only making this much. Yes, Miss Andrew, this take home part was actually from, you can see it's in this budget assignment, and in that one, the taxes were mentioned. I just felt like getting taxes involved would be too onerous here, so we did not get into doing that part and thinking about how taxes would get involved. But it is true that if you're, earning this much per year and dividing that by 12, we're not taking into account the fact that you got to pay taxes on that, which is sad, but true. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time filling all of this out. We could stick some more numbers in here. I'm wondering if we can have a quick conversation about these two categories, because if we look up the 50-30-20 rule, the basic idea, and you can see it in whatever site you go to, is 50% for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings. So how does that apply to required and discretionary? Which one is needs and which one is wants? Which one of those words is a need, something that you have to have? Anybody? Did you fall asleep?
Well,
The
when I
most
think about,
obvious one is food.
Well, but first, just to be clear, which category, required or discretionary, because those are fancier words than needs and wants. Or-
Required would be a need in my mind.
Right,
Discretionary
right.
is a want.
Correct. Right. So that's the 50%, and the want is the 30%, and the savings is the 20%. So that is the 50-30-20 rule. And the part that you have to do here is to make sure that you're categorizing each one as a need or a want. So we can go one at a time, and then we could do a couple if we wanted. Probably rent and heating and utility, all these utilities need to fall under what category?
well, I think I would consider having a roof over my head and heating in the wintertime. I would consider those required things that I need.
Yeah. And so if you click on the little paint bucket, you can choose different colors. I would just have two colors, one for the required things and one for the discretionary things. As you get into, say, this section, these are both ways that you spend money on food, but some people might sort of split this now into, well, I have to eat, but I don't have to eat out. And so they might make this second one discretionary and not required. And so there's a little bit of sort of analytical thinking there for you to go through and look at each category and think about whether it's a need or a want. Internet, is that a gray area? I don't know. I would kind of consider it a need, especially for the things that people have to do in their lives. But maybe that's, it's not a need. I don't know. So there's not necessarily a right answer here. This is you categorizing which thing fits in which category. So we're going to fill this out and we're going to, let me just go back and look at the instructions here just to make sure we're not overlooking anything. Start with the total monthly income. We did that. Go through the list of expenses. We got to decide if it's discretionary or required. Oh, this part is kind of important. As a high school graduate making this much money, am I going to have a car payment, car insurance, and gasoline? Those are three things. I might kind of put those together that I have to, I'm going to just make it a different color right now. But I could just be paying transportation costs to the CTA and have a little bit set aside for some Ubers if I need to. That might be a cheaper way of doing it. Did I say something about how much to pay for a car? No. So again, if you don't know anything about car payments, I mean, we did some problems in class, so you could, have some examples of situations, but it's one of the things that you got to kind of think about. What am I going to choose to do? And it might be a place where the professional budget is different from the high school budget. I might just say, no, I'm not doing all of this. If I just graduated from high school, I'm going to have a transportation line. So what I did there was I just clicked on this to insert a new row. And then if I want to get rid of rows, I can highlight them and click delete. If you press delete, then it's just going to clear the cells. That's not the same as actually deleting what's there. But of course, if I'm deleting the whole row, I have to be careful that I'm not deleting other things that I want to keep. So I could delete this way and then shift the cells up. So then transportation becomes something required, but I don't need to have a car necessarily as a high school graduate. Although some people do. They want to be able to drive around and be more independent. So let's talk a little bit about this section here. This is for when I'm finished, the total. I should be using one of my basic formulas in Excel here, my sum formula. Put everything together. Of course, I don't have a finished total, but once I have this total, I can bring it over here. And again, I'm going to use a cell reference to do that. And then I can look at my savings, which would be income minus expenses. Without having filled the budget totally out, I look like I'm doing pretty good. I've got $1,500 of savings. But as I keep putting more things in here, this number is going to go up and this number is going to go down. So for example, okay, I do need to have some streaming subscriptions. So let's say I've got $40 worth of streaming subscriptions. So you can see, and again, this is the power of the cell reference. My total changed. So this changed. So this changed. Okay, I do need renter's insurance. Whoops. Is that still sharing? My screen just went black for a second.
I can still see it.
Okay, great. $60 here. So as I go, I'm going to have more and more things adding up. This is going to get bigger. This is going to get smaller. Might be kind of fun to do that right away, as I've done here, and then keep filling it out and kind of see where I'm going to get to. Let's talk about this little blue section right here. So in the projected area, I want to think about what the 50-30-20 rule says I should be spending on required, and I should be spending on discretionary, and I should be putting into savings. And this is an application of doing some percentage work, because 50% of my pay should be going to required expenses. So how do I do 50% of something? Got a couple options, of course, but what comes to mind?
So I know that when you're trying to take the percentage of something, I know you're supposed
Yep.
to multiply.
So we take 50% of, and then I would bring in the cell reference here. So again, I'm not having to type. Now, the point about division, Erica, is that if I do 50 times the number, this is a crazy big number because 50 is not the same as 50%. So we divide by 100, we get back to the point that we're interested in. And again, you can do that by 50 times the amount divided by 100, or you can just say 50% of the multiply, and you can get it directly. One of the things I like about Excel is being able to use that percent sign instead of having to convert it into a decimal first. So I need to do the same thing for discretionary and savings. Of course, these three things should all add up to that number. And then in this section, I can't do this until I'm finished here. But basically, let's say, what else do we think is a required cost? I feel like there's no healthcare in this list, or like hygienic needs or something like that. Is that just groceries?
Well, I see personal care as,
Oh, personal care. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's say, I don't know, $40 a month. And I'm going to call that a need. And I'm going to go hardcore and say, no, my streaming subscriptions are not a need. They're a want. My cell phone really is a need. My internet, I'm going to call that a need. Okay, let's just say these are all my needs. So here, there's a couple of ways I can do this. I can go through and I can do the clicking and adding one cell at a time. But don't forget that the whole point of sum is that it allows us to take things that are next to each other. And even if they're not next to each other, I can do it, but it's easier if they're next to each other. I can just drag across the range of cells that I want to add up and say, okay, give me everything from B12 to B18. And if I need to add more stuff on at the end, I can go back and say, okay, and I need this number, and I need this number. So at the end, I should be able to see what I'm predicting. And this means that I'm in good shape, and this is what we're going to get to in the budget analysis here. But basically, my projected cost is $1,400, but my budget prediction says I'm only going to spend $1,300. So I think I'm doing pretty good. I do need to create a new version of this. The good news is that once I've created this and I copy it, and this is my preferred way to copy, is to right click on the tab, which should bring up a little menu here. And then you get move or copy, and then you should be able to create a copy. It doesn't really matter where you put it because you'll be able to move it later. But now I'm going to rename this to be professional budget. And this is where I'm bringing in the other number from here. And I forgot to divide by 12. And now I just need to go back through these numbers and think about, well, what could change? I mean, I probably don't need to spend more on heating. I might care to spend more on rent because now I can afford to spend more. Same thing with groceries, or I might make my eating out budget go way up because now I'm making some good money and I want to go out to eat. So the good news is that once you've done the grad budget and you copy and paste or copy the sheet over, the other sort of slower way to do this would be to just make a new sheet and literally copy this whole thing and paste it in. One of the bad things about that is that you get this sort of reset column width. And just a quick point about that, we see these little hashtags. If you just drag and make the column wider, get back to where we were here. Okay, so I'm going to move on from the budgets. I feel like we got a good idea about how we're going to attack this part. So let's go back and look at our section here. Total of each of the two categories, find the amount of savings. Yes, so we've gone through, and this is an area where the instructions are sort of mirrored by what's in Excel. So if you do what's in Excel, you're accomplishing this task. But there are some extra points in this little bullet list here that might be helpful to you. And the one thing that may be different is that idea about transportation and whether I want a car or don't. But a car really requires multiple costs. It requires a car payment, potentially maintenance, gasoline, and car insurance. So there's 4 different costs potentially to add in if you're being realistic about having a car. Okay, so budget analysis. Let's take a look at that sheet. Required discretionary savings. These calculations have already been done. And so I just need to bring the cell references over. And in fact, this is the first place I can use autofill because I think it goes in the same order. Required discretionary. So I should be able to go here and then autofill down. These are blank right now because these are blank. But if I put in the discretionary part, which was the 30%, now when I look at my budget analysis, there's that number. So these are all cell references. Then the savings analysis is the projected savings versus my optimal savings. And so for this part, I need to again bring the numbers over, but this is the row where I'm actually going to do some work. And so just to kind of review, let's just make up some numbers here. Let's say that I was supposed to save $800 a month. And well, let's be clear here. This is projected savings, right? So let's say I was supposed to save $800 a month, but I was only able to save $500 a month. So what is the percent difference? And as we look at this, the important thing is that the order matters because we're subtracting, we're finding the difference, and then we're turning it into a percentage. And so number one, the order matters. And number two, the thing that we're considering as our reference is important because it determines what the denominator is. Remember the sort of basic formula. One of the ways to think about this is new minus old divided by old. But you can have the value 1 minus the reference value divided by the reference value. There's various formulas here that we could consider. So the important thing is that when I determine the direction of the subtraction, that also tells me what my denominator needs to be. So let's look back at this and see. I want to find the percent difference between my savings and my optimal savings, positive percentage if I'm saving more, and negative percentage if I'm saving less. So I'm going to consider my optimal savings as my reference value, because if I'm saving more, then I should be doing, let's say I was saving $900 a month, then I would be doing 900 minus 800 because I'm making a positive increase on what I said that I should be doing. So that means that I'm going to set up my subtraction to be, and then the parentheses are important here because if I don't put parentheses, I'm going to end up having a weird value. So this would be 12.5%. And again, I can use a little percent symbol up here to format. I can add more decimals if I want. If I'm spending under, the number should end up negative because it represents the fact that I'm doing worse than I said that I should be doing, or what the 50-30-20 rule said that I should be doing. So you're going to do that for both the high school budget and the professional budget. This is a little bit of a tricky part here. So if you're feeling confused, what's the subtraction? Who's the denominator? That's a place to definitely check in and get some feedback. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to do a quick kind of summary of the student loan repayment. This is our last sheet. I know there's a summary sheet, but we're not going to do anything on that. Any questions before we talk about this last area? Let me just double check. Milestone. There's some writings here reflecting on our budgets. So the last section really has 3 parts, and this is where we apply all of the work that we've done around loans. First of all, you may be able to find a cosigner for your debt, especially for something like a student loan. So we're thinking about a parent, somebody who has stable income, somebody who has a credit history, and basically you have a little research task here to go and find out a little bit about what cosigners are. We've done a bunch of research tasks already, so I'm not going to go to Google and do the research, but go get some information, answer the writing question, make sure you bring in a functional hyperlink. So basically, I have 2 different interest rates. I get a lower interest rate if I get a cosigner. I get a higher interest rate because the bank thinks that you're riskier if you don't have a cosigner. And so I'm going to come through and I'm going to start calculating this debt 2 different ways. So the student loan, I'm bringing over from the very first sheet. And my APR, this is the non-cosigned loan. I need to grab that number from here, 6.57%. And then my length in years, I think it says here that I'm going to do 10 years, okay? So now I'm ready to answer the question because I have the amount I'm borrowing, I have my APR, and I have my length of time in years. I'm ready to do the formula that I need for figuring out how much of my payment going to be. Let me point out that if you want to make this more realistic, you're getting grants. You don't spend $11,000 a year. You don't need to borrow $11,000 a year to be a student. You're welcome to make some adjustments in here to reflect something that's more realistic to you. You do need some debt. So, even if you're doing all of this NLU work debt-free, just pretend like, you've got a little bit of debt coming out of here. It could be as low as $5,000, something like that. So I can go through, I can use the PMT formula. And one of the things I like about the PMT formula is it kind of walks me through the things that I need. We've done this a lot in class. For my students, definitely would want to see you using cell references here. So you're not typing 6.57%. You don't need to. You've got it already sitting there ready for you. Remember, that's an annual rate. So how do I make that monthly?
Divide by 12.
Divide by 12. It's going to come up many times. And then we've got the N per, which is how many periods or how many payments are we making. So if I do this for 10 years, no need to write 10. Let's use the cell reference, and I need to scale it up by 12. Last but not least, this number should be negative, and I'm bringing in my last number. It's a little hard to tell whether this answer makes sense. This is one of the things that's important about the total payback number is it gives us some solid ground to stand on in terms of like, does this answer make sense or not? So how do I answer the question? I got this payment and I'm going to do it over and over again. I always like to do simpler, similar in this situation. You're paying me $10 a month for 4 months. How much are you going to pay me total? So what is the math that I need to do to figure out how much is this person, me, paying back total over the life of the loan? I know it's late. I'm asking you to do math. I think mathy thoughts.
Well, so,
Get
I
'em
mean,
off
you
the
know how
hook.
much what's that?
Yeah, I'll get them off the hook.
Yeah,
You can take the monthly payment and you multiply it by the number of payments, which is 10 times 12.
nice. And you're welcome to write that like this. You can say 120. It'll all get us to the same place. So the fact that this is in the same ballpark-ish, it is bigger. Those are both comforting things to me. Why is it bigger? Why am I not just paying back $46,000?
Well, because the person who lends you the money, you have to pay them back and then you have to pay them extra because they charge you extra money. They charge you the interest.
Interest, there you go. Yep, that's the magic word. It's not free. If we were borrowing the money from grandma, maybe she would be able to just give us the money and we would just pay her back. But no, this is probably coming from a bank. I think it does say in the problem it's a bank. We're going to do that twice. So we're going to do this, then we're going to do it again. It's a different APR, but everything else is the same. And you choose. And again, you would probably want to choose the one that is going to cost you less, but think about your life and what's realistic in terms of, do I think I have a person that's going to co-sign for this, or, have my parents said, we're not in a position to be able to do that kind of thing. Might be an opportunity to have a conversation about it. So, whatever you choose, doesn't matter. We're moving into the last section, which is our payoff table. And you've done work with this with credit cards. It works in the same way. I just want to show a couple of things that are important here. So you've got your total starting balance, which you can bring over as a cell reference. You've got your finance charge, which we consider like simple interest, principal, rate, time. So we've got our balance, we've got the rate, and the time here is the kind of the weird part, because in the PRT formula, T is years. So we need to think about what 1 month would represent, which is a 12th of a year. Another way to write the formula is to just divide by 12, because multiplying by 1/12 and dividing by 12 are the same thing. So I've got my finance charge. My new balance is putting those two things together, because if I borrowed this much money and now the bank is charging me extra, I've got to add it on. And the payment here is the part where you're making a customized payment. And so pick a payment value that is higher than the minimum you calculated in Q2. So for instance, if I'm doing the non-cosigned loan, I couldn't find somebody in my life that was going to be able to do that. I need to go higher. It doesn't give you any requirements or parameters for how much higher, but I like round numbers, so I'm just going to go up to $600. What's important here is to put equals 600 so that when you do the autofill, it will be functional. We're not quite ready to autofill. I need to bring in the next starting balance, which I will do from the new balance, taking off the payment. And now I'm ready to start autofilling. But when I do this, you're going to see something a little strange happen. My finance charge goes nuts. And it's like, whoa, what happened? I had a $200 finance charge. Now I got a $30,000 finance charge. So what happened was that I tried to use cell references because people have said, use cell references, they're so important. But this B3 is actually what we call a fixed cell reference. So I need to stick dollar signs here and here. The other option is, and I don't mind this, to just say 6.57%. It's okay to do it as 6.57%. But it is also okay and very cool to start using fixed cell references and say, I want to do this cell. Oops, nothing like that. I have to do it, and then I have to put the dollar signs in. So if I do dollar signs on both B and 3, I'm sure that it's staying fixed on B3, and then I should be ready to autofill. This was a 10-year loan, and so I'm going to expect that this is going to take me a few rows to get done. 120 to be exact, but I'm hoping it's going to take less. I'm very confident it's going to take less. And I'll just point out that we're not going to be able to finish all of the tasks here. But whoa, this is way too far. Up. I went a little overboard. By the way, those parentheses can be confusing, but basically it means that I've gone negative. So my last payment here does not need to be $600. That's the part I always look at when I'm looking at the students table. Did you give the bank $600 the last time or not? I don't need to. This is it. This is the amount of debt that I have left. My last payment can be less than all the other payments. And now I'm done. 2 more math questions to answer. How much time did you save? That's a little easier than how much money did you save? For the money saved, the hint that I'll give you is that, you know, you can look at that through two different lenses. How much did you pay total in both situations? So you've got to compare this side to this side. Remember, you've chosen one or the other, cosine, non-cosine. So you could compare total paid in scenario 1 to total paid in scenario 2, or you could compare the interest paid in scenario 1, because that's the thing that changed. The cost of the college didn't change. What changed is the cost of the interest. And this is the big payoff question in terms of your analysis and thinking, like, well, if I'm more aggressive with my debt, I can save myself some money. So that's it. That's the whole project. There is a reflection section here, writing and thinking about, you know, how this went for you and how you're feeling about things. It is a big project. There's 3 of these in the term, and they represent a fairly large part of your grade, but I also am hoping that you feel like you can see a connection and a relevance that makes this feel like it's worth doing. All right, 701. I know we didn't get to spend equal time on all sections, but hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
All right.
Professor, and thanks for letting me sit in.
Of course,
you.
Michael.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you,
Esther.
everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, Erica.